The IL-2 Shturmovik is a famous Soviet World War II ground attack aircraft that was one of the major key actors in the Eastern Front of World War II. I will eventually make a fully dedicated history about this plane, but for now what you need to understand is that during the late 1930s, the Ilyushin Design Bureau started working on a ground attacker that could replace the Antonov 17. After the victory against its competitor, the Su-6, the IL-2 entered production. Shortly after, the Germans invaded the USSR, and the Soviets needed ground attackers more than anything else, and the mass production of IL-2 begins. However, everything is far from perfect, and the IL-2 started with plenty of hiccups. For starters, in 1941, due to the lack of engine power, it was decided that the tail gunner would be removed. Later down the line, they decided to add it back with a brand new engine in 1943. Speaking of a brand new engine, the Ilyushin Design Bureau also started to experiment with a radial engine as well, but that was kept as a plan B. The main cannons were the VY-A23s, or I'm just gonna call them YVAs or Yavaz, but some of the factories didn't have this cannon, so they slapped the 20mm SHVAK or Shavak cannon on it. In the 1942, the optics also got changed to this, which we now know and love to this day. And at the same time, Germans also managed to capture one IL-2s as well and strap German-made bombs on them. Modification after the addition of the new engine and the tail gunner was the center of gravity stabilization, which gave us the Arrow Wing IL-2s. You also had a further development of its engine, which was the IL-8 in 1944, but that one was quickly changed to the future development of the IL-10. This was a heavily summarized and general history of the IL-2. Now let's get on with the armors and modules. Welcome to the Armor and Modular Protection Analysis, where we basically analyze the armors and modules inside of a vehicle. Today's aircraft is the IL-2 Shturmovik. Now the first thing we need to take a look at is the crew. Depending on what type of variant you want, you either get one pilot and a rear-facing turret gunner. The 1941 and 1942 and its German-captured variant don't have the gunner, while the rest of the models do. Depending on what variant you might have, you have either two fuel tanks or one extra fuel tank behind the pilot seat. On a side note, all of the fuel tanks inside of the IL-2s are self-sealing with a neutral gas pressurization system. Z-19, take note, you piece of shit. The prototype IL-2s don't have the massive fuel tank behind the pilot. However, the IL-8 has a third fuel tank underneath the pilot that is very tiny, with these fuel presets. The fuel presets on these aircrafts are relatively standard, and I have to say if you want to play in realistic battles, make sure to pick up the lowest amount of fuel you can possibly carry. However, when it comes to long sim sessions, I would recommend you to pick up at least 25 and at most 30 minutes of fuel. And even if you're set on fire, well, tough luck, you son of a b****. You have a 95-octane fuel tank behind you. What, you expected me to say fire extinguisher will be a good friend? Bitch, you barely even have a friend behind you. And even if you do have that friend, he barely even has a proper seat. And he literally sits on a f***ing belt. What, you expected a fire extinguisher on your plane? Jesus Christ, man. Y'all motherfuckers expected way too much from a Soviet plane. Anyways, I'm roasting this poor guy a little bit too much. The reason why the fuel presets are different than the other is because of several reasons. 1. Different fuel tanks, and 2. Different engines. And speaking of different engines, this aircraft has 4 engine types on 4 different variants. The first one is the AM-38, mounted on early variants of the IL-2, such as 1941, 1942, and its German-captured variant. The second one is the prototype radial M82, only mounted on the IL-2 M82. The third one is the improvised AM-38F, which is mounted on the IL-237, 1943, IL-2M, and its M3 Arrow Wing variant, and finally, the best of them all, the AM-42, which is only installed on the IL-8. I will eventually discuss the manual engine controls in this section, but for now, what you need to understand is that the engine has decent acceleration and it does the job quite right. When it comes to pulling the aircraft forward, however, this aircraft hits a brick wall at 400 km per hour. That is, without any armaments. The difference between the AM-38 and the M82 engines are quite minimal, and have basically a similar performance. Well, quote-unquote similar because, you know, the warm reducing power on that thing is just a lot better. The AM-38F allows you to be more flexible with regards to the engine performance, and the IL-8 with the AM-42 is the best of them all, and has an extra top speed, but it comes a bit worse when it comes to turn fighting. I will eventually talk about the flight performances a little bit further into this video. At the end, you have the 3 oil cooling systems, and 2 liquid cooling systems installed around the engine, and 1 outside of the engine compartment, with the IL-2 M82 only having 2 oil cooling systems, and the IL-8 having 1 of the rear liquid and oil cooling systems merged together to be inside of the fuselage. Then you have the traction of the control surfaces, and finally, the spars. Of course, we cannot just simply gloss over the IL-2's armor, as this was one of the key and famous parts of the IL-2 itself. The armor profile all around is the same, with some minor differences here and there, but you should have 4 and 6 millimeters of steel around the engine compartment and both sides of the pilot and around the radiator respectively, with 12 millimeters of steel behind the pilot and front of the pilot. Then you have 64 millimeters of bulletproof glass at the front, which is quite interesting. In the 1942 variant, it's basically the same armor profile, except for the fact that there's a new iron bar on top of the pilot, which literally blocks your entire view in the cockpit. The IL-237, however, gives the addition of dorsal 6mm armor plates with a bit of 4 and 6mm of more protection around the gunner section, with the IL-2M and IL-2M Type 3 being pretty much the same. The only armor profiles that I found significantly different are the M82 and the IL-8. The latter has a lot more of a refined armor for the fighting compartment, also with the radiator being inside of the aircraft, which makes it a lot better. Also, you have proper glass protection instead of open canopy for the gunner, and then you have the M82 variant, which has zero protection around the engine except for its back. You have 4 and 6 millimeters of steels scattered around the pilot's and the gunner's canopy, with also a different canopy layout. Compared to other IL-2s, this thing is more like a hatch instead of a slider canopy. It also has a semi-open protection for the gunner. Fun fact, you might have noticed some IL-2s, specifically the 1941 and the M82 versions, have a hole in the right wing. Literally. But in the others, it will be covered by a massive radiator. Yeah, this is what we call the carburetor intake cover. And yes, it does what it's named after. Also, another fun fact, depending on your model, some of the IL-2s might have a thinner tail wheel than the others. Thanks a lot for showing me that, IL-2 Sturmovik 2003. This was all of the modules and armors on this plane. Now let's have a look at the weapons of this aircraft. Let's start with the S-8KO rockets. Wait, hold on. Oh, wait, yeah, sorry, my bad, it's been a while, man. Let's start with the bombs, with the AO-25 in the inner bomb bays, 3 per pod, giving you 12 total. These bombs generally have more of a quantity advantage rather than explosive mass. Damage-wise, they can be nice to ground targets in ARB if you drop it accurate enough. However, you better drop these bombs that... The powers just okay, yeah, whatever. I'm recording with phone anyway. However, you better drop these bombs accurately because it only has 3.7 kilograms of explosive mass. Base-wise in RB, it's not really worth it. Up next, we have the FAB-50 forged bombs installed on the inner bomb bay and outer hardpoints, giving you 6 total. These bombs get 25 kilograms of explosive mass. Now you can finally take down ground targets with confidence, if your confidence also comes with a ton of skill at dropping these potatoes in the first place. As for bombing bases, it's still not enough and I wouldn't recommend it. For ground strike in ARB though, it can be nice to start with. Considering the fact that your quantity is the same as the 100 kilogram bombs, you can also combine the heaviest rockets with these bombs as well to have the best of the both worlds. And speaking of 100 kilogram bombs, you have the FAB-100 installed on the inner bomb bay and outer hardpoints, giving you 6 total. Now we're starting to talk about some real standard bombs. Now these guys are essentially your common and extremely useful bombs. Sure, you get 36 kilograms of explosive mass and your damage may not be that major to the enemy base, but you will get a lot more oomph to destroy the ground targets easier. ARB wise, if you want to go ahead and have an easier time taking down ground targets or pillboxes, feel free to do so. Up next we have the BRAB-220 armor-piercing bomb, or BRAB-2 installed on the external pylons, and FAB-250 bombs installed in the same position as the previous bomb, giving you 2 total. The armor-piercing bomb is usually used against ships or anything that wants deeper penetration. That sounded way too off! And the FAB-250 is essentially your high-explosive bomb. I would personally recommend to destroy the enemy ground targets with the FAB-250 and use the armor-piercing bomb to destroy the enemy ships. And when I say a bunch of ships, I'm not really talking about these gunboats in Spain now, for example. Both of them are quite decent for destroying the enemy bases. However, you can only do half of the damage, so I personally wouldn't really go for bases at all if I'm in an IL-2. But I would destroy a base if I was in an IL-8, because you have the FAB-500s installed on the external pylons, giving you 2 total. These guys are big enough to destroy an entire base, and I have to say they are very nice for what they are. However, please remember that if you actually mount these bombs, your maneuverability will be tempered down quite a bit. Yes, your speed can be very good, especially with a brand new engine, but you have to find your own tactics in order to destroy a base, as every single dumb mother that wants to kill you will immediately go for your sorry ass, leaving you with nothing to do but to turn fight, getting you into a weird situation where you can't jettison your bombs because you want to drop them on a base, but at the same time you have to dogfight the guy in order to survive. But hey, you know what? Honestly, I don't blame them. I would probably do the same. And the final bomb is going to be the SC-250. This bomb is essentially your usual FAB-250 bombs, but the German equivalent of it. There are more differences than just a simple copy and paste, but unfortunately I do not have access to the internet right now, so I would assume that they're fairly similar to one another. This bomb is only installed on the German-captured IL-2. Up next, we have the rockets. Now, generally, we have two types and three tiers of rockets. The first tier is the RBS and ROS-82s, and the second ones are the RBS-132 and ROS-132s, and finally, the third tier, which is the ROFS-132. All of these rockets are divided by two types. The first ones are the SAP-HE rockets, which have the RBS designation, and then the rest, which are high explosive. Let's start from the tier 1. The ROS-82 is a very light high explosive rocket that has a very low amount of explosive mass. Personally, I wouldn't recommend them as their SAP-HE counterpart not only has more explosive mass, but also has 50 millimeters of extra penetration. In the second tier, the ROS-132 is a decent rocket that can be moderately used against lightly armored targets. The SAP-HE equivalent of it, on the other hand, has approximately half of the explosive mass with somewhere around 85 millimeters of penetration. And finally, the third tier, the ROFS-132, which is the heaviest rocket you can possibly pick up on this aircraft. This rocket has 4.5 kilograms of explosive mass, and I would highly recommend you to use these rockets, as you can overpressure plenty of vehicles at this BR. However, these guys are quite heavy for the 625 kilogram payload capacity. Combining rockets and bombs can be a bit tricky, as your wing load is quite limited when you carry both bombs and rockets. So I personally made some loadouts, and if you want to use them, feel free to do so. Now let's have a look at the main cannons and machine guns of this aircraft. All of the IL-2s have the 7.62mm SHKAS or Shikas machine guns with 1500 rounds total. And depending on your model, you either get the 20mm Yavaz with 300 rounds total, or in the case of 1941 and the M82 variant, you also get the 20mm Shavak cannons with 420 rounds total, with 800 rounds per minute. The cannons on this aircraft are absolutely punchy. This, alongside the machine guns with high fire rate, they feel promising for ground striking and even better when you use them against the enemy aircraft. The 37mm cannons, on the other hand, feel meh, I guess. I mean, if you got a good angle, you can be effective. Is it really worth all that payload exchange though? To me personally, I don't think so. But if you like it, feel free to use it effectively. The defensive machine gun, on the other hand, have a different characteristics on some planes. All of them, with the exception of the IL-8, which has the UBK, have the 12.7mm Berezin UBT gun with 150 ammo, and the prototype M82 variant, however, has 280 rounds. The gun arc on these gunners can vary from model to model, with the M82 variant being the most limited, and the IL-8 being the most open, and the common IL-2s have somewhere in between. I will eventually put a summarization and comparison of every single variant and their differences in the end. But for now, let's have a look at the flight performance. When it comes to its flight performance, this aircraft has a unique yet simple flight model. You always get the ground attacker spawn in ARB, but if you want to take off, this aircraft is not bad, but not great either. Your maximum speed on normal IL-2s is 400 kilometers per hour. The one with the worst top speed is the one with the M82 engine. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, post-editing Bob Dickinson over here. Now, I do apologize for the weird off-cut over here. The problem is that when I was writing the script, I didn't have the opportunity to try out the IL-2s and see how they would perform, because my internet was cut off and I couldn't access the warthunder. So I basically tried to estimate all the speeds and like the maneuverability and stuff in my head, or at least as much as I remember that I played the game a while ago, and I would write them on the script without testing the vehicles themselves. Some of it actually went wrong, some of it was correct, and of course Gaijin themselves adding some stuff out of like nowhere in the update. For example, in the upcoming update that's coming, they literally added 4 more rockets, and not to every single one of them, to the IL-2 1942. Oh, and the previous update, apparently M82 also got 4 new rockets as well. So it's kind of a confusing situation right now with all this stuff, and we all know who's at fault, but I'm not at a place to judge anyway. Either way, so I got some things wrong in the script and I had to remove them, specifically about the mobility and maneuverability of the aircraft itself. But after I tried them out, here's what I got. Alright, so here's the thing, right? The IL-2 1941 itself feels really well to maneuver around, at least in sim. The 1942 is also kind of similar to it as well, with the IL-2 M82 being a little bit worse, and it overall just felt like a tad bit more sluggish than usual. But then you had this thing that I forgot to mention in the video. Apparently, once they add in, for example, the rear turret gunner, the weight of the aircraft increases quite a bit, and that makes it sluggish as well, which can be compensated with the improved engine AM38F. Unfortunately, the M82 engine doesn't really have that. I mean, it does certainly have the improved max thingy. So in my personal experience, the IL-2s from 37 onwards feel relatively sluggish, with the exception of the IL-8 being a little bit better, but still except that the cockpit inside is just very much pain in the ass to work with. But here are the stats that I've tried so far. Maximizing the engines using the manual engine control, here's what I found out. Now, the IL-2 1941 can easily go up to like 420 kilometers per hour without any payloads. With the payloads, you are going to hardly reach 400 kilometers per hour. For the imagine all of those stats with the IL-2 1941 and 42, right? With the engine, but like reduce its entire performance to like 20 kilometers. Literally, like it reaches like 400 kilometers per hour easily, but then it just cannot reach above 380 without the manual engine control. With regards to the AM38F, the Arrow Wings, and the IL-8, I will put the informations on the screen so you could just pause it and read it without any kind of problem, so I wouldn't take too much of your time, but this was all of the information I needed to give you, so let's go back to the video. Your armor does the job quite well until you meet the heavier machine guns at higher BRs. Doing head-ons on this thing can be incredibly fun. However, the problem begins when the enemy goes vertical, because that's when the IL-2's weight and armor starts to work against itself, therefore starts to work against you. Your optimum performance is 1000 meters and below. I personally wouldn't recommend it, as it takes quite a bit of time to gain speed and altitudes above 1000 meters. What I would recommend, however, is to become a flying catfish and sweep the f***ing ground like a Russian pilot movie has intended to be. Your speed is limited and you really can't climb as fast either, so expect to be strafed by the enemy planes more often than usual. Baiting people into fights from behind can be a decent option. If the enemy is accurate and has some high caliber and dangerous weapons, you're pretty much done for. But hey, you know what? Let Igor rely on his beautiful and accurate Berezin. Seriously guys, and let us shoot this stupid thing. The IL-8 is the one with the most major differences. And with regards to the manual engine controls, the IL-2 is basic and very good at it, with having propeller pitch and mixture controls, plus the oil and radiator controls. This aircraft only has landing flaps and uses a conventional gun sight for the cockpit as well. This variant also debuts the elevator and rudder trims on all IL-2s. The IL-2 M82 variant has no mixture control, neither an automatic radiator control, but it does have both manual oil and air radiator controls. This aircraft also has landing flaps only and has a conventional Soviet gun sight in the cockpit. The 1942 variant has basically the same properties as the 1941, except that the gun sight has changed to a conventional IL-2. The IL-237 and all variants in front of it have received the additional takeoff flaps. However, the IL-2 M-Type 3 Arrow Wings and onwards have received the combat flaps as well. The IL-8 brings back the conventional gun sight and also removes your oil radiator control. As far as I've tried, none of the IL-2s have aileron trim controls, so you must use your rudder and elevator in sim in order to compensate. Or I don't know, just use the memory foam equivalent of the sim controls, dude. This was all of the information I had about the flight performance. Now let's get on with the game modes. When it comes to Assault Air Arcade, this aircraft does not perform bad at all. For what the mission objectives are, this aircraft feels very nice to fly with, but fairly sluggish to fly around. You'll see what I'm talking about in just a minute. In this game mode, you have 4 mission objectives: destroy the enemy bombers, destroy the enemy attackers, destroy the enemy ground targets. The final one, uninstall the game because you realized that you needed an RP booster instead of a SL. Destroying the enemy bombers is relatively nice. Once you spawn in, you have enough altitude to go ahead and destroy plenty of them in a head-on. Turning around is not going to be a problem. However, those gunners can be really annoying if they focus on you. Your armor will tank plenty of rounds, but once they hit you from the back, it can be a little bit more problematic than usual. Destroying the enemy attackers is even easier than bombers. You're gonna have too much fun with these guys, as your cannons are quite powerful and the attackers are quicker to shut down than the bombers. You do have to remember that sometimes the enemy gunners have a fairly limited view, so try to see if you can attack them from very below or very high. Destroying the enemy ground targets is going to be your main job. Once you got the 2 waves of artillery attacks on your base, you can instantly pick up your rockets and bombs and start going in guns blazing. If you run out of secondary munitions, don't worry, your cannons and machine guns will have you covered until you reload. Now you might say that, comrades, with regards to these 4 objectives, The IL-2 is one of the best at its tier. While yes, that can be true, however, there is one thing that I did not mention every time I try to do these objectives. I had to despawn myself because this thing was so painfully slow that I felt like it took forever to reach the objective. Even with the arcade performance boost, this thing feels fast at diving, but oh my god, it's so goddamn slow and climbing to Jesus Christ. That's why I changed the J button to a phalanx button. By the way, you thought the speed on this thing is bad? Wait until the climb rate is going to make you disappointed. Compared to the other planes, it doesn't do well with regards to its climb rate. Imagine destroying the enemy attackers and you have to gain a lot of altitude to destroy the enemy bombers. This is not going to be a pleasant experience. Or even destroying the enemy ground targets is going to be even worse, because now you have to carry extra armaments that make you heavier and add extra drag. Oh, and I almost forgot, you also reload every 1 minute, so you have to jettison them all the time. I would recommend you to J out every time you change a loadout, or if you can't reach the enemy fast in time. I understand that some people can't afford the extra SL, but if you can't or don't want to, just feel free to play the game normally. Speaking of play the game normally, let's have a look at the Air Arcade. When it comes to playing the Air Arcade, these sets of aircraft are very good for their designated role. If the enemy mission objective is relatively ground strike focused, you can heavily contribute to the team. However, once the enemy plane dives down on you, you may or may not be able to survive. In that case, try your best to focus on the ground targets. If the enemy is close and killing it is going to be really fast, immediately commit and take the kill. Your bombs and rockets are enough to deal with the ground targets, but personally I wouldn't recommend you to destroy the bases in Air Arcade, because apparently bases in Air Arcade are off tanky. As I said in the flight performance section, your turn fighting is good, but your energy gets tampered down a lot. This was all of my knowledge in Air Arcade. Now let's have a look at the Air Realistic. When it comes to the Air Realistic, this aircraft is a nice ground attacker. Your flight performance is decent for the job, and your payload is also good for it as well. However, if you're exposed to the enemies, you're going to struggle quite a bit. So for that reason, it is better to keep it close to the friendlies if possible. Once again, I wouldn't recommend that much to go for the bases, but if there's an unfinished base or if you're farming bases with the friendlies, feel free to go for it. That is, if you actually manage to go through the multiple hostiles trying to eat you alive. Anyways, let's have a look at the ground realistic. When it comes to ground realistic, this entire series of aircrafts are quite nice. Your bombing and accuracy will matter even more, as sometimes your bombs can pretty much define the entire turning point of a battle. Depending on what vehicles you choose, it can be either from 2.7 or 3.3 or even 3.7 if you're generous enough. The vehicles that you fight with are, I love how you have the ugliest and prettiest T-34s in one lineup. I don't care how spicy that take is, at least it doesn't suck like the next door neighbor that looks like a Samsung fridge. Speaking of KV tanks, oh my god, this thing looks like it was made in the Soviet Union. Epstein's Island if it was reincarnated as a Soviet tank. This is Daniel. This is Cooler Daniel. This is Sexually Frustrated Daniel. Daniel trying to be a main battle tank. And finally, a child. The KV-1 and its better variant, KV-1S. A naming system Apple would shamelessly steal 70 years later. Lenin's coffin reincarnated as a tank. Socialists took the potato farms away from the farmers just so they could make ammunition for this whack ass. If I could tell you how can you resemble the Soviet Union in one picture, you would probably show me this. In each folder, you will see one trash and one great SPA. And now, let me turn into Dora the Explorer real quick. Can you guess which vehicle is so good and the other one looks so horse it makes me regret grinding this thing?
Exactly! That's what I thought! Best thing that you know to me! F***ing fight me for it!
This is such a nothing burger, I don't care about it. Any open-top vehicle that looks like this should be sent into the Shadow Realm because this is the most boring design I've ever seen. One of the most fun vehicles in the entire Russian tree.
Hey, Colonel, look, I'm the best comedian ever. 5th generation aircraft. Stop the fucking laugh track, you son of a bitch.
Now let me accurately showcase the political spectrums of the world, featuring the tuberculosis man.
This you have the gender swap socialist. We call this the Green Party. Hamza Yusuf's wet dream. In America, we call this a libtard. Fortified version of Epstein's Island. Oh, and I almost forgot. Listen, this thing existed. Oh, now let's have a look at the helicopters. Never mind, let's have a look at the planes. Yeah.
I apologize. Now let's have a look at the Yak series of aircrafts in the chronological order. You have the Yak 1, Yak 1B, then you have the Yak 7B, and then Yak 9, then Yak 3? Man, I thought the AH-1 Cobra's naming system was confusing. Holy sh**. My beloved MiG-3 series.
Polikarpov never disappoints.
Did you seriously have to name your plane's lag to actually make it into production? Oh, and 4 of them, mind you? Like, imagine you design an aircraft and then call it Bear or PB-1. Not only the plane gets canceled, but it also gets canceled on Blue Sky of all places. Oh wow, look Los Angeles series of aircrafts. Of course, I will not roast my boy, but should we just ignore the fact that this aircraft is also so much out of place? I mean, look at it. You have 3 folders of the IL-2, then you have whatever this is. If you remove the numbers and the slash in between, you turn it into a Polish insult. There are 3 bombers in 1 folder, yet I don't understand a single difference in between any of them. Lag, libtard, communist, Tories. God bless Polikarpov. Outdated. God bless Polikarpov for a second time. Lag. I don't like to call this libtard, so I'll call it Joe Biden. And of course, Soviet production coming to a halt because they ran out of red paint for this. Overall, you have plenty of options on the table for your taste, and if you're bored, you can also up-BR yourself as well. Although watch out for the enemy anti-air, try your best to enter silence mode with your prop pitch, and use your cannons after you drop your munitions, and good luck on the battlefield. Now let's get on with the air sim. When it comes to air simulator battles, this aircraft does not disappoint. At lower BRs, most of the people you face up against are outright vegetables. I'm sorry, I just love the f***ing word. This can give you plenty of advantages to understand your aircraft, how to dogfight with it, or how to do ground attack missions. In higher BRs though, stuff gets quite serious and expect yourself to be involved into more dogfights and get shafted a lot more. Your cockpit visibility gets worse and worse the further you go. It gets so much worse that the next variant, the IL-10, you can literally see how much Soviet Union has changed its strategies with regards to its design. Somehow that also translated to the Su-25 as well. Overall, it is quite promising in air sim, and I think it is going to be good. Now let's get on with the final verdict. Welcome to the final verdict. In this section of the video, we're going to have a look at which vehicles are worth the grind or not. Let's begin with the first IL-2 1941. This variant is very nice and it is one of the best IL-2s so far with regards to its weapons loadout. However, it does not have the higher caliber Yavak guns, it does not have the tail gunner or the iconic gun sight, and of course it has the basic engine. But it has the best cockpit visibility amongst all of the IL-2s, and of course at a relatively low BR. Verdict: get it and spade the hell out of it. Hell, I got talisman for this too. Up next we have the IL-2 1942. For the sake of simplicity and the ease of access towards the general differences of these variants, I managed to make this simplified chart for the final verdict section. It is not perfect and a lot of details are missing, but don't worry about it. If you got confused, feel free to go back and have a look at the timestamp below. Anyways, the IL-2 variant has the same engine and flat presets as the 1941. It has the worst rear cockpit view, but it requires an improved gun sight. And it holds the improved Yavak 23 cannons and a common weapon loadout. It has a slightly larger fuel capacity and it has the common manual engine controls. This one is right after the 1941 variant. It has minor changes over the previous model, and if you want to play this in sim, I would say the 1941 variant is better. But other than that, it also has 4 less rockets and it does not carry the BRAB armor-piercing bombs. Verdict: get it, but spading it is optional. Up next we have the IL-2 M82. This model is a lot more closer to the 1941 variant, with the difference being that the alternative choice of the engine and only having the prop pitch and manual air and oil ventilation controls. Outside of that, it doesn't have the BRAB bomb and it has the gunner seat, which makes it a lot heavier. The gunner addition and the weight increase will be available on all IL-2s with the exception of the 1941 and 1942 variants. While yes, you can have a gunner seat on this thing, your engine however is not improved unlike the later variants, resulting in a worse performance. Not to mention that you only have the prop pitch alongside the manual air and oil ventilation controls. Unless you're a collector or love the IL-2s or just want to use its premium features, verdict: this one is going to be optional. I personally would get it if the price was less than 20 to 25 bucks. Up next we have the IL-237. This variant gets the improved engine compared to the basic model, receives the additional takeoff preset, gets the new gun sight, but then everything crashes on the ground as soon as you look at the weaponries. You only get the NS-37 and 2 types of bombs. Other than that, the engine control is the same and the fuel presets are bigger than usual. Personally, I didn't play it much. I generally love comically large cannons strapped to planes, but this one personally really didn't stuck with me. I love the British equivalent to this, but not this one honestly. Since it's a foldered vehicle, verdict: I would say get it, but spading it is optional. Up next we have the IL-2M 1943. This model has a lot of similarities with the previous variant, with the difference being that the armaments have switched to your average IL-2, which began since the 1942 model. I would say this one is quite decent if you like to play ground realistic. Also, one fun fact about this variant: this specific IL-2 has the updated cockpit, while the rest of them do not. How can you tell? Well, fairly simple. Look at this wall plug looking thing over here. It's fully modeled and has no problems. Now look at the same plate face to different cockpits of different types of IL-2s. As you can see, they didn't even bother filtering the mask around the textures. Oh, also these absolutely annoying glass lines that makes it extremely uncomfortable to fly with, at least for me. Verdict: get it, but spading it is optional. Up next, we have the IL-2M Type 3. Compared to the previous variant, this aircraft gets the famous arrow wings for the center of gravity stabilization, and other than that, majority of the things are relatively similar to the previous variant, except for the cockpit not being an absolute eyesore. This model also gets even more fuel presets as well. Just because the fact that this is the best free IL-2 you can get, personally, verdict: get it and spade the hell out of it. Up next, we have the IL-2M Avenger. This is essentially the same model as the previous variant, with the most major differences being that the gunner glass protection was completely removed by the ground crew. This specific aircraft was based off of a special historical version of the IL-2, which deserves its own video. Now, if you like to own this thing, it occasionally comes from time to time. Personally, I love the historical aspect of it, so I would say yes, get it, but if you don't want to, feel free to avoid it. And finally, we have the final frontier of the IL-2s, the IL-8, or which I would like to call it, the Battle Pass IL-2. This one gets major changes. First of all, you get a much better engine, your ability to use combat flaps has been completely removed, you have a very bad rear view, and you lost the arrow wings feature, gun sight was reverted to the original one, your ability to use rockets has been completely gone, but instead you get the FAB 500s and 2 armor-piercing bombs, and you got the common manual engine controls of an IL-2, but without the oil ventilation. Currently, the price of this vehicle is not that bad. If you want to get it, you should spend around this much. I personally wouldn't buy it if it was more than 30 bucks, so if it's lower than that, verdict: get it and have fun with it. The IL-2 is one of the most influential aircrafts of all time. Ever since I was a child, I always loved the iconic aircraft, mainly because of the old IL-2 Sturmovik game. But even in War Thunder, this aircraft still holds a special place in my heart. Ladies and gentlemen, I really wanted to make this video for a long time, and a history video will be coming soon about this aircraft as well, and if the video is ready, you should be able to see it now. If not, then feel free to click on this video to see the Russia's punchiest tank cannon, or to see the ultimate guide for Eurocopter Tiger, or whatever YouTube wants to recommend you. At the end, ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe, dislike it if you dislike it, and if you want to support my channel even further, you can also donate a super thanks or join my YouTube membership if you want to. For now, this is me, Bob Dickinson, and thank you for watching.